Welcome everybody to today's webinar, How to Print on Cylindrical Objects. I'm Kitt Jones, Application Specialist here at Roland DGA. So today we're going to talk about the RotaPrint. We're going to talk about setting it up and go ahead and give you some takeaways here. Different cylindrical materials you can print on, setting up the RotaPrint attachment with the printer, how to use Roland VersaWorks Dual to set up your file. Now, before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about the LEF family of UV printers, which is what the RotaPrint is designed specifically for. The LEF is a UV printer, so this means that the UV ink prints on top of the substrate, so the material. It does not soak into it or print into it. So you can print on just about anything. Now, that doesn't mean that that will fit your application. So we're going to talk a little bit about knowing your application, knowing your materials. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see here, we've got the LEF 300, the LEF 12i, and the LEF 200. Over to the right, we've got a picture of the RotaPrint. It's a standalone fixture that actually fits into the LEF, and the bed is what actually controls the tracking, thus allowing it banding-free, real high-quality prints. So let's talk a little bit about material selection and setup. Again, I talked to you a little bit about the UV technology, which allows you to print on just about anything. However, that doesn't mean that it's going to fit your application. So first and foremost, I want you to be aware of your client's expectations. You need to talk to them a little bit, figure out exactly what they're trying to achieve before you print on something that does not fit their need or their expectations for their product. Know your application. If a client comes in and they want you to print on a glass for their restaurant, and you know that this is going to be going into an industrial wash machine with temperatures in the water ranging all the way up to 300 degrees with high pressure water, probably not going to fit or work. So you need to definitely get to know that. Test your application prior to the purchase of your media. So if a client comes in with a particular product, they want you to print on it, just test it first. Or if you're looking at products online, you think, oh, this might be a good application for me, buy one, test it, know it before you sell it. Once you figure out certain surfaces or materials that actually work for you, use those. Play to the strengths of the machine and the RotaPrint. There's tons of different materials out there, and we're going to go over those in just a few minutes. That the UV ink gives a good solid adhesion and is very abrasion proof. Properly prepping your media. So there are adhesion promoters that you can use, and again, we can refer you to some of those. We have that information, so if you'd like that, you can email us. But most importantly, with a lot of the plastics, the plexes, the acrylics, the glasses, they have a lot of static in them. So make sure you wipe them off first with an anti-static wipe or spray. Very important, because what's going to happen is you're going to get deflection in the ink. So the ink's going to come down, it's going to try to find that surface, and the static's going to push it away. So what's going to happen there is you're going to get a kind of a blurry image. So if you're getting blurry images and you're not wiping your stuff with an anti-static spray or wipe, this could be a problem. Test, test, test. I can't stress this enough. As an application specialist, that's what I do, is I do testing all day, try to find different products, different applications. Go above and beyond what you know, push yourself. There's no reason why you can't try something new and figure out a way to make that happen. As an entrepreneur, I know in the past, I know what my machines will do, but I always push them to the limit. When somebody came in and said, hey, can you do this? My answer was, I don't know, but I'll try, So do it. Find different substrates that you think might work. Like, say, for instance, I've got some candles over here that I printed on. I would assume, just thinking about it, that candles probably aren't a really good surface to print on. But Actually, the UV ink prints very nice to it. It's a high quality image. And, you know, obviously expectation of that is that if I dig my fingernails into that, it's going to scratch off. So, you know, again, knowing your application. But this would make a real nice product for weddings or, you know, retail, that kind of thing. So by doing some of this stuff, a little, you know, knowing your materials and prepping them properly, you're going to hopefully get some success. Now we're going to go over some setup, and we're going to go over actual materials so I can kind of give you an idea of what works, what we know to work, and what doesn't work so great. But again, it's up to you to kind of test that. Now, again, because the UV technology, it prints onto the surface of pretty much anything. You could print on ice, but once that ice melts, I mean, obviously, your print's going to dissipate. You've got wood, wax, ceramic, acrylics, polypropylene, PET, leathers, styrofoam, brushed metal, aluminum, plastic, PVC, metal, cardboard, polycarb, polyethylene, glass, and silicone. Now, some of these print really well and adhere great. Others, not so much. Now, these would be what I would consider to be good, solid materials to use. A lot of them you don't necessarily have to use an adhesion promoter, so you know, especially with, say, the wood or leather and brushed metal, you could probably use an adhesion promoter possibly if need be, depending on what you're looking for expectation-wise for its durability. Now, the challenging materials in all that, aluminum, smooth metals, polyethylene, glass, and silicone. Silicone tends to flex, so UV ink doesn't like to flex much. It does have a little bit of a flexibility, but if you take it and you print it on, you know, a silicone, something cylindrical silicone, and you stretch that or move that, bend it, it's probably not going to adhere. It's probably going to crack and eventually break off. Glass, with all of these surfaces, they're very smooth. There's really nothing for the UV ink to bite into, and that's with the adhesion promoters, it kind of gives it something, a base to bite into. But like with glass, it's very smooth, very slick. You know, it's a challenging product or material. So if in fact you are going to print on glass, again, test adhesion promoter. Polyethylene, you'll see this in a lot of, say, the squeezy bottles that, you know, football players use, and, you know, they use them a lot in sports. The problem with polyethylene is it's actually an oil-based plastic, so they use a lot of oils in that. And we know oil is slick, that it's always kind of outgassing or seeping, so what happens is you're going to get failure, maybe not instantly, but maybe a couple days down the road, maybe a month. The other thing is, you know, because polyethylene is very flexible, and again, you see that on those squeeze bottles. When those bottles get squeezed, the UV ink's probably going to crack. So what can we do to kind of help that? You know, first and foremost, I would say just use materials that will provide you good adhesion, ones that you know that work. If somebody comes in, they want, you know, it's a sports team, soccer team, they want polyethylene bottles because they want to be able to squeeze them out on the field, just tell them no, you can't do it. Or you know, let them know and give them a proper expectation up front. Say, look, I can do it, it's going to be great, but the minute you get out there on the field, you start squeezing that thing, the graphic's probably going to come off. Something else you can do is print a very light amount of ink. That might help that. Use an adhesion promoter, so especially for glass, glassware, aluminums, and smooth metals. The adhesion promoters are some pretty good ones out there. So, and again, we do have some recommendations, but again, you need to test them per your product and or application. Don't be afraid to do some post-print coating. So, for instance, you can put resin on top of UV ink, and it doesn't affect it. You can add acrylic. They sell, you know, acrylic spray. That might help the lifespan of it. That might help it to actually adhere better, keep it from being, abrasion proof somewhat. They also have overglaze. So like you see in ceramics, they have glazing machines. You dip it in the glaze, you put it in a kiln. They also have low fire or even cool glaze that you can utilize. So check into some of those. I think there are ways that you can go about securing these graphics better. But again, these are kind of things that you have to go above and beyond and test for yourself, based on your application. There's many different applications. There's too many for me to say this works for this and this works for that, but this doesn't work for this. So, you be the judge. You be the one that does that testing. So now what I have, I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the cylindrical objects that you are able to print on well. And some of the different techniques that we've used on these. I talked about the candles earlier, so let me go ahead and show you some of these candles. As you can see, it's a very high quality graphic. It prints real well. Now, once this candle is lit and is burning, it's not going to burn the ink. Basically, what happens with the candles, it starts burning and it soaks down, and then the wax eventually goes along the side. So, like any candle, it's going to be ruined when you actually light it. And it is very soft. So obviously with wax, you don't want to dig your fingers into it. Now for post-process of this, maybe you could dip it into a clear wax to give it an extra coating of protection. I've never tried this, but give it a shot. Let me know how that works out. Here's another candle, just to kind of give you another example of what's possible. Now for personalization and customization, I think candles might be an ideal material or substrate. So if you're a retail location, you're thinking, wow, what am I going to print? What would I use this RotaPrint for? This is ideal, along with other materials and products. But, I think for like, say, weddings and things like that, this would be perfect. I'd love to get a candle with a picture of my kids on it or what have you. Let's see. So the next one I'm going to go ahead and show you would be just basically a tin that's been painted, and it appears to have a overcoating on. Now this is very, very durable. This I've scratched this and it sticks and adheres very well. I didn't have to use any adhesion promoter on this. And again, a personalized or customized object here, you could do just about anything. If you have a particular product that you could put in this, or again putting grandma's picture with happy birthday on it and maybe filling it full of candy or something. I think this actually makes a really good product. Now these, some of this stuff I just basically got on Amazon, and I wasn't sure whether I would have to use adhesion promoter or not. I printed them, tested it, and found that this works. So if I were a retail location or somebody that was utilizing the RotaPrint and the UV printers, this would be part of my arsenal. Because I know that if I just drop this into the printer, set it up properly, it's going to give me a high resolution image, high quality, and it's going to have very durable adhesion. Now, these are some of the things that I printed. Now let me show you a couple things that we had sent in to us from one of our clients. This is COG, and a young lady named Hannah Morand actually printed these. Now these are prototypes, so that's what they use these for. They basically got a natural can and basically printed all that you see black here. Now the top, I believe, was already black, or they spray painted that. So the RotaPrint obviously isn't going to get down into these areas, but as you can see, it does get into this concave pretty well. Now obviously designing, I wouldn't want to put any text in there because that's going to get a little bit fuzzy. So don't worry about that. And I'd say, that's an excellent application. It's very durable. I tried scratching a little bit on the back. It actually sticks very well. So again, this would be something, I don't, as far as prototype, great. Mass production of this, you be the judge. You know your application better than I. So if this would work for you in mass production, great. Now this is just aluminum, essentially. And with aluminum, generally I would say if mass production is going to be what you're doing with this, I would definitely try out some different adhesion promoters, maybe even some post processing as far as covering it with something. And here's another one that Hannah did. This is an actual bottle. Now this one's kind of interesting because with the RotaPrint fixture, you can only get one pass out of it. Now that means that you can either do white CMYK or CMYK with a matte finish. You can't do CMYK, gloss, and then layer, 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 only because the way the nature of the RotaPrint, it actually the bed leaves the rolls on the RotaPrint or the rollers, so lining it up and registering it's a little tough in those situations. So what Hannah did is she went ahead and she printed the gloss first. So she did a complete 360 print of the gloss with that texture on there, and then went back and printed the white CMYK over the top of that. So she didn't really have to register this product. It wasn't, you know, critical. So again, knowing the application, this is an awesome use of dual layering, but not having to register. So again, great application, I think. Here's another print that we got from COG, and this is basically just a wine bottle. Now this is, I believe these were done for prototypes for the actual client so that they could say, love the design, go into mass production. And as far as mass production, I don't believe they would use the LEF. However, you could. So in this case, she just basically did a white CMYK on this. Now, there's a little bit of white showing up, and I'm going to show you basically how to kind of set that up here in a second, how you can fix that. But anyway, so we'll go ahead and get to some of those here in a second. I am going to now kind of talk a little bit more about setup. Now, setup is everything, and your RotaPrint setup, it shouldn't take you any more than 5 minutes to get that thing set in the machine, setting your head height, setting your X and Y, and being able to print. Now, the first thing you notice, well, number one is always make sure that you have the most current firmware. This is very important, especially with the RotaPrint, because they make changes here and there that actually improve. So you want to make sure that you have that in there. Secondly, before you put the RotaPrint into the machine, put a piece of cardstock down, basically because the bed itself, it has holes in it for the vacuum, especially on 300, but it has screw holes, and sometimes those wheels will hit those holes, bounce your product, and give you a little bit of a fuzzy image. Now, make sure you're using the correct side of the RotaPrint. And basically, if you look here, we've got two sides. This side is for smaller objects from 1.5 inch all the way up to, call it 2 inches or 2.5 inches. And then you have the back side, which is basically for larger objects or uneven objects, say angled objects. And basically, just by undoing these thumb screws here, you can take this bed, flip it around whichever direction you want, whichever size you're actually needing to go with. So in this case, this is a 3-inch bottle. I would want to use the larger size for this. And we're going to talk about that bottle here in just a second. Okay, set your head height. Now make sure that you're within 2 millimeters of your object. If you have to be more than 2 millimeters, then make sure you're using distance mode in VersaWorks Dual. And that's basically in the setup of VersaWorks. Make sure you allow for full rotation of your object. So in the instance of this, you would have to print the full circumference of this. And as far as the way that I would do it, I would probably wrap a string around it, measure the string, or I would figure out the mathematical equation, which I'm sure you can find that online. I don't know it right offhand, but I'm sure we've got it out there. If you're using white ink, make sure that you choke your white. A lot of times people call me and they're like, oh, my white's peeking out. That's easily fixed, and we're gonna go over that, but basically you do that by choking your white. Just like you would on an offset press or any other printing press, you have to make sure that your registration's in line. You have to use chokes, spreads, same as you did before. Now if you look here over to your right hand side, you see that at the very bottom we have a special color plate generator. Now at the very top there, it says, there's a selection button that's not selected. You can actually choke or spread your white ink without having that selected, but essentially this menu is for auto applying a white or gloss background or foreground, whichever it may be. But on this particular object that we're seeing here, I would go with like a -4. That's going to be a choke. If I had a +4, then that would be a spread. So a lot of times you're going to want to encapsulate an object. You can spread the underbase, spread the overbase. In between, you've got your CMYK. So that's where you do that. And then if you're getting extreme offset, maybe you have an uneven bottle or it's not fully round, it's got a little bit of a high spot, you can actually fix that with your position correction. So, and that, again, those are things you want to test and play with. If you look over to your left-hand side, you see that this is the basic setup. Now, I've set this up for this bottle here. So this is that bottle printed. Essentially, I laid it into the machine just like we have here. I don't know if we can go over to that. Yeah, so this is the position that we have. This being our 0, point here. And I can show you back in VersaWorks. If you look at the very top left of the actual image, you see the 0 and the 0. So that means that the head is going to come out this direction. So it's going to print this direction. Unless you're doing, well, the head's still going to come out that direction, but if you're doing bidirectional, then it's going to print both ways, going and coming back. Now, quality settings. This is very important, and it took me a while to kind of dial this stuff in and play with it and figure out exactly the combination to get a good, solid quality print out of these things. Now, if you look at the top left there, under quality settings, I'm calling out standard, and I'm actually printing bidirection. And this bottle, the bottle was printed in standard bidirectional mode, and the way that I was able to achieve that was by having my head height properly set, and then also using these settings. Error diffusion. That basically will print with a finer detail, which means you're going to get a lot crisper of an image and a higher quality image. Now, if I didn't want to use error diffusion for some odd reason, I could go to high quality mode, but that's going to take a little bit more time. As you see up there on top, high quality is showing 5 minutes, whereas standard 7. The reason being is high quality, that would just be for the CMYK. If I were to click on that and then hit white CMYK, it would probably jump up to about 10 minutes, maybe even 12 minutes. And if I were to select unidirectional, then again, that also increases the amount of time. So with these settings, you should be fairly successful. Now the next one down is interpolation. You can get, if you use the bicubic, that's a high quality setting. So that's basically the screen pattern or how the ink is going to print onto your object. So by using the finer detail and the higher quality, you're going to get a successful and high quality print. Now, I've selected ignore default settings, and why would I do that? Basically, I've slowed the head down just a bit. Basically, if I just allowed the default setting there, it would be at 5 minutes, I think. So I slowed it down just a little bit. Whenever I'm printing white and CMYK over the top of that, I slow the head down just so that registration is a little tighter. I also use my special colored plate generator and choke my image, again allowing a little bit more of play. Okay, well, thank you everybody. We hope you found this webinar useful and got some information out of it. And if you have any more questions, you can email us. Or if you need more information, you can go to our website at rolanddga.com and look under webinars or under Roland Academy. Thank you.